This is a keynote address by Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, President of the International Movement for a Just World, for the 2023 AMAN conference. The title of this address will be Islam and Governance.
Friends, peace be with you. I'd like to begin by thanking Aman for this kind invitation. Islam and governance. Now, governance is at the very center of Islamic teachings. The numerous references to governance, both direct and indirect, in the Holy Quran. Governance played a big role at the advent of Islam. Governance is closely, intimately interwoven with almost every aspect of Islamic life. The references to governance in the Quran, for instance, in relation to state administration, community relations, relations between the sexes, relations within the family, and in almost every other area. They are known to a lot of Muslims. But what is not highlighted is that if you look at all these references to governance in Islam's most authoritative text, Quran, the fundamental goal of governance is justice at whatever level. Governance expresses itself, the fundamental goal is justice. Justice permeates the entire conception and practice of governance in Islam. So let us keep that in mind when we talk about Islamic governance. And I want to underscore the significance of this, why governance is so critical in Islam, by drawing our attention to a very well known verse in the Quran. It is in Surah Nisa, that's chapter 4, verse 135. Surah Nisa, verse 135. It says, "O you believe, stand out firmly for justice as witnesses to God, even as against yourselves, or your parents, or your kin, and whether it be against rich or poor, for God can best protect both. Follow not the lusts of your hearts, lest you swerve." And if you distort justice or decline to do justice, verily God is well acquainted with all that you do. This is a very clear example of how vital the concept of justice is. Imagine justice even if it is against the interests of your parents, yourself. you have to speak up for justice, you have to stand up for justice. So this is why justice is so central to any relationship, to governance in its entirety in Islam. And that is in the Quran, which is the guide for the Muslim. Now, it's not just in relation to the Quran. Justice is also the theme that defines the Prophet's leadership of Medina for 10 years, from 622 AD to 632 AD. Those 10 years that he led Medina in almost every issue, it's political, economic, regional, or an issue dealing with communities and individuals, the concern was justice. And this is significant. It is very, very important. Why? Because you not only had justice as exaltation, you had the expression of justice at the practical level, at the level of community, of people, at the level of human beings grappling with real challenges. And for these people at that time, at the very birth of the prophecy of Islam, they were told that the cardinal principle is justice in whatever they do. This is significant because if you look at it historically, the community that Muhammad, peace be upon him, established in Medina was perhaps the first and only community in human history which was led by a prophet. And how it was led by the prophet, and what it did, and what its achievements were, and how it grappled with the various challenges that confronted it, these are found in concrete form. They have been tabulated, they have been supported by evidence. They are not myths or tales from dim past. They are part of a living history, and that is what makes it very significant. This is why the Prophet's example as the leader of Medina and the society that he created in Medina, 10 years, and the various issues that he dealt with, they've remained an example and an inspiration for Muslims right through the ages. And Muslims who came after the Prophet, the dynasties that were established, the rulers that emerged, and indeed various tracts and treatises that were written, they all held up to this principle of justice articulated at the time of the emergence of Medina as a state under the guidance of the Prophet, which makes it very unique actually in history that such a thing had happened, and why that unique dimension of Islam, the relationship between the religion and governance, is something that one cannot push aside through arguments like politics has nothing to do with Islam, and politics is something else, Islam is something else, governance is something else, Islam is something else. You just can't do that because it is right there at the very advent of the religion, closely interwoven into Islam itself. So this is something one has to keep in mind. What one has to do is to try to understand what it was and what it means for us today, and not distort its actual meaning and its purpose. This is what goes wrong sometimes, but we have to know that there was this phenomenon of Islam in relation to governance. As I said a while ago, the dynasties that came after the Prophet and the great rulers, some of them were men of great caliber, people like Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, the eighth caliph of the Umayyad dynasty, or someone like Salaluddin al-Ayyubi, that's Saladin. They were great leaders, and there were a number of others too. And you had numerous articles and writings which would attest to what they had achieved. One of the most famous of this, which every person, not just Muslim, should read, is this beautiful letter sent by Caliph Ali, the fourth Caliph, Sayyidina Ali ibn Khalid, to the person whom he had appointed as the governor of Egypt at that time, a person by the name of Malik Ashtar. It's one of the most famous letters in history. And in that letter, he discusses in detail and in depth what governance means, what good governance means, what should be the characteristics of a leader, what should be his principles, how he should manage different segments of society, how he should keep people together. And what emerges from that letter is this clear message that never place yourself as a leader, the governor, at the center of your endeavors. Subordinate yourself, serve humbly, selflessly. That is the message. It's a very powerful message. And he tells him, Malik Ashtar, the governor that he had appointed, how he should act in different situations, looking after the people, the welfare, well-being of the people should be his prime concern. And he should see himself as their servant in every sense of the word. He should not be cruel. He should not oppress. He should not marginalize the people, and so on and so forth. When I was teaching in Malaysian University, I recommended this as a text for my students in Malaysian politics and in politics in general, something that they should read. And I've also sent it to our leaders in Malaysia at different times in our history when they attained power and so on, just to remind them gently about what it is to be a leader. There's a very interesting phrase there, he says, where Sayyidina Ali says, don't be like a barbarian to your people. You really have to respect them, and you have to, be kind and considerate and compassionate, and of course just. Now that is the message that you get from Islam, from the great Muslims, the Prophet himself, people who came after him, the leaders, the men of learning. This is the message. But having said that, friends, we must also admit that in spite of this very sound advice, there are many Muslim rulers who have deviated, who were corrupt. When you come to think of it, corruption is openly condemned in the Quran. It is condemned in the Sunnah, the example of the Prophet and the way he took a very firm stand against corruption. And in Sayyidina Ali's famous letter, and yet there's been corruption, abuse of power. This has happened at different times amongst Muslim leaders in different situations. One cannot deny this. Um, it doesn't make Muslims unique. Others have also done the same. In other words, this is one of the similarities between different cultures, civilizations, and religions. That in reality, this is what has happened every now and then, and this has gone on. We will not be able to get rid of such deviations totally, because that's part of the challenge, part of the struggle, part of the mission that's given to each and every one of us, because we have to uphold the truth. In order to uphold the truth, you will have to stand up against injustice. So this is going to happen. One will have to fight these injustices. So what we can do is, in order to ensure that we remain truthful, we are honest as far as the fundamental principles are concerned, what we have to do is to ensure that there is always space and scope in society for people to articulate what is right, even in a situation where things are all going wrong, when things have become bad, when evil triumphs. You must have space and scope in society. So maintaining that space in society to tell the truth, to point out wrongdoings, to correct your rulers. In other words, in contemporary language, to speak truth to power. That space and scope must always be there, which is why any society, Muslim societies included, must uphold freedom of expression, of organization, of assembly, of action. It's very important. You cannot get rid of this because there'll always be the need to articulate the truth. So that space must be there and that space must be respected. There's something else that we must do, not just ensure that this space is preserved and protected for all times. We must also, whenever we have the opportunity, create institutions, structures which will give real meaning to values like accountability, honesty, good governance, and so on. You must create those institutions because, in the end, exhortations are not the real solution. You need institutions, you need actual mechanisms, and these are the instruments that will remain after us. These are the instruments which will ensure that a certain value succeeds in society, that it strikes root, that it germinates, it flourishes. So you must ensure that institutions are created. So I would see this as the challenge for all of us in ensuring that there is good governance, which is a very, very important challenge, not just for Muslims, but for all human beings. And let me say in conclusion that this challenge has become all the more urgent because of what's been happening in the world in the last few years in particular. Nearly every segment and sector of society is in some sort of crisis. The crisis is the level of the individual, what he is, what he is to do, how he is to act. It's not as clear cut as it was 50, 60, 70 years ago. Things have become far more complicated. There's a crisis in the relations between individuals, males and females, within the family, between and amongst the community, at various levels of society. In other words, how we govern ourselves today has become a very big challenge compared to the past. And how we govern our environment, how we look after nature, how we look for other creatures, animals, how we look after plants, the other gifts that God has given to humankind. Because that's our responsibility. We are the trustees. The human being is a trustee. So that has become far more critical today. Look at the climate change challenge. Look at the challenge of nuclear weapons. Look at the challenge of war. These things are very real, much more than they ever were in the past. Which is why we have to address these challenges, work towards overcoming them. But I suggest that what we should do is, knowing that there are all these crises, we should now articulate with confidence and with strength this idea that there is a perennial wisdom in all our civilizations. It is the collective perennial wisdom of humankind that all of us share, whatever our religion or culture or community. That wisdom should be the counterweight to the challenges that we face. The perennial wisdom. To give you just a simple example of this, what is this perennial wisdom? Well, which one means, as the words suggest, wisdom that is eternal, wisdom that is not bound by time or place, perennial wisdom. A simple example, the wisdom that our forefathers were aware of, and human beings have been aware of in all the different cultures and communities for thousands and thousands of years, live in harmony with nature. That's an example of perennial wisdom. Don't fool around with nature. Don't destroy nature, because the price, you will not be able to pay the price. We are seeing it today. This is an ancient adage. We've deviated from this ancient adage. Live in harmony with nature. You're not the master, you're a steward, you're a trustee. You have no right to dominate and destroy. And the same thing with other areas. Live in harmony with the fellow human beings. They're not there for you to conquer them, to destroy them, to dominate over them. You're there to live in harmony with them. That's an ancient truth. Likewise, in the family, there are certain relationships that are unique to the family. Preserve them, protect them. You can't say, for instance, we have become modern, we don't need these things. That's nonsense. These are things that are very important. So the more you reflect on this, and the more I am reflecting on Islam and governance, I realized, yes, the way we govern ourselves and the way we look at governance, that is also part of the perennial wisdom. Being kind, considerate, caring, being just at all times, that is part of the perennial wisdom. And we have to hold on to that perennial wisdom. That wisdom is the answer to the crises that we face and will continue to face. And let us realize that in connecting with this perennial wisdom, we transcend boundaries. Today we talk about Islam and governance because of the occasion, but you find the same wisdom, very similar in many respects, in all the different traditions about how we should administer, how we should look after the weak and vulnerable, how we should ensure that justice is done, that we are always fair and right in what we try to do and so on. So that's the perennial wisdom. You'll find it in Confucianism, in Taoism, you'll find it in Hinduism, in its various expressions, you'll find it in Sikhism, all the religions you can think of, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, is all there. And this should become the meeting point for people. And a body like AMAN, which has always been open to people of different religions, even in its membership, that was the intention when we set up AMAN in 1990. And I think it is critical that we hold on to that principle, that there is a perennial wisdom, wisdom that transcends boundaries, and that is the common heritage of humankind. And we should every now and then go back to that, reconnect with that perennial wisdom. And what we're doing now in relation to something that is very important, governance. But again, you'll see that wisdom is expressed in so many other areas in life, whether it's family or nature or attitude towards animals, everywhere there's a parental wisdom. And the sad thing is that a contemporary human being, in his or her cleverness, has every now and then discarded this perennial wisdom, and we paid the price. But the future should adopt a much more mature attitude. Be conscious of this, the perennial wisdom, the age-old truths. Hold on to them and use them as our guidelines as we strive towards the future.